Okay, so I don't really know what I'm doing here, but so I'm doing a special stream today because I recently was sent a MacBook Pro by Full Sail University. I guess that's part of my tuition, and I'm sure it'll come into play later on. Um, and I already have a computer that's kind of weird. I use a mini PC. I use a kind of weird PC. You can't buy the kind of PC I normally use. You can't buy that at Walmart or Target or Best Buy. It's a for a mini PC that a friend bought for me. That's what I've been using for most of my stuff. But today, I am using a MacBook Pro because it actually has a built-in camera. It's been a long time since I actually had a working laptop with a built-in camera because my really ancient laptop that's not doing so well and doesn't really hold a charge had a built-in camera. But after the upgrade to Windows 10, it just completely fizzled out. I don't really like Windows. I usually use Linux, but I've been using Mac OS. And here's the thing is that I have actually succeeded in doing two things today. And today I'll just be talking about what I've been able to do because there's a lot about a MacBook Pro that I don't know how to use. So the screen resolution is different. So well, first of all, I managed to install the Xcode developer tools. I managed to install Homebrew and I managed to install Raylib and SDL. Now, the reason I installed these things is because that was what I used for my own game development back when I was on Linux, and then on Windows I installed the right tools. Getting it installed on Linux is easy. It's in the package manager, or they're just simple commands. Installing things on Windows was a little bit more difficult because I had to configure paths and I had to make my own build scripts, and it took me months to actually figure out how to compile stuff on Windows because I do things on Linux usually. However, doing this on a Mac was not so bad because there's specific instructions. If you go to like the GitHub on for Raylib or SDL2, you can actually find macOS specific instructions. So that's what I did. So I followed the directions to install the Xcode developer tools. That took a while. Then I installed Homebrew, and apparently it uses like curl. So like it downloads using curl, downloads a certain script, and then installs it straight from the GitHub. So as long as you have an internet connection, you can do that. So I installed Homebrew, and then I just looked up some example commands, and so it was as simple as like say brew search SDL. Then it showed a whole list of packages including SDL. So I just installed the SDL2 base package, and I tested it by downloading my SDL Chasetris source code straight from my Patreon account, which nobody seems to view my Patreon account except me, but I can upload files to my posts, so it's sort of a convenient backup. So I downloaded it, and then the file manager that is on Mac OS is very similar to Linux. Like it's very similar. I mean, it's similar on Windows too, but things are more Linuxy or Unixy on Mac OS. So I find because Mac OS is closer to Linux than it is to Windows, like there's a terminal. It runs Bash, the born again shell. So you can LSCD, you can GCC, you can do everything. You can do all your stuff. Now the one thing I haven't figured out is that when I try to run GCC, apparently GCC is a symlink to CLang or Clang, however you say it. So this means that if I type GCC, it'll still run CLang, but that's not really a problem because I was able to use the exact existing make file. I just typed make. My Linux build script for SDL just worked. It just worked out of the box. I didn't have to do any changes. There was some compiler warning messages, something about my functions not having prototypes, and yet it compiled and ran, so I don't even care. So I was able to actually get my Tetris game in SDL running on Mac OS, but it did not work in the full screen mode because the full screen mode I had configured for was for 1290 by 1080. So I had tried to do that, but apparently it seems like my screen resolution is my total screen resolution on this MacBook is less than that. So I can't do the same screen resolution because it's different. But I was able to use my standard definition one, the 1280 by 720, and that fit and was smaller than my screen. So that's what I did. And I did the same thing for the Raylib version. I basically did a brew install Raylib, but then I didn't know what commands to use to compile it. What compiler flags do I use? And see, when it comes to Raylib, Raylib is different because it seems like you have to have the compiler flags for the exact right location where the Raylib library is installed, and that's pretty standard anyway. But apparently, you have to, because things are installed in like opt, homebrew, whatever. So and I don't know much about homebrew. I just completely just figured this out on this MacBook, so it works. But yeah, anyway, so after I found out the right command by reading the documentation for macOS specifically on the Raylib's GitHub, I made a separate text file. Oh, that's right. I'm going to back up that text file because I have a text file that has the command that I used to compile it on Raylib. Now, here's what I noticed that was weird. Okay, so actually, it doesn't matter too much. But anyway, I had to do the same thing. See, in my code, because you have to consider that Chase Triss, which you've seen me stream on Twitch. I have streams of me playing Chase Triss. I have videos on my TikTok, my YouTube channel. So you've seen that game before. I would show you in this stream, except the screen resolution is different than the camera resolution I'm using. So the camera resolution I'm using is the high definition camera. So right now, all I'm showing is my camera. And, okay, I'm seeing a pink thing here. Okay, I'm trying to see here. I want to see here. What is this? Okay, let's switch to non-mod settings. Let's see here. Because I want to be able to see whether, yeah, because I might get chats. Okay, I'm going to try something. Okay. Hello, world. Okay. So I just typed a message into the chat, and it showed up for me. I have the chat window here, and this is actually cool. Now, obviously, I'm not really good at knowing how to use this MacBook, but I did install, the programming tools to compile my Tetris game. Oh, what I was going to say earlier is that for both Raylib and SDL versions, I have a simple if statement. So, like, if the number in the parentheses is 1, it will execute that statement because 1 is true and 0 is false. So I can turn on or off at compile time. I have to edit the source code every time, but I can use that to determine whether or not it tries to launch in its full screen mode. So since I have access to the source code, I'm not too concerned with that. But anyway, I can do the smaller or bigger resolution, but it scales pretty well. Like, I could do almost any resolution, even something that's really non-standard. And since my text size is coded to match, it's to match what the screen resolution is, then that would it would work. But anyway, so even though I'm better at when it comes to programming, when it comes to playing video games, obviously my other computer is still better, because it has a full-size keyboard. And even though you can't see it, you can probably figure what I'm saying. So you know how, okay, so like, look at the figures. You know how some keyboards like this MacBook, it has the left and right, up and down, but the up and down are right above each other. It's crazy. Actually, that's actually pretty standard now that I think about it. But the keyboard is a lot smaller on the MacBook. The MacBook is a laptop. It's a lot smaller, but because it has a built-in camera, this means I can actually have a computer to stream from or record from my camera without having to worry about, oh, is there enough space on my cell phone or iPad? And there is not much space on my iPad because I was trying to install the clothing package for Shining Nikki. You know, the dress up game. I love the dress up games. And okay, this is really cool, guys. So I just made a discovery. So you know how, okay, if any of you people are old, and by old I mean people who are in their 30s, like me, um, you may remember that Facebook used to have games, you know, like Facebook used to have built-in games like we had Farmville, there was Mafia Wars, there was even Robot Unicorn Attack back in the good old days, back when Facebook actually had games. There was even a Tetris game built into Facebook. It was discontinued, sadly, and I'm very sad about that because I had like the highest score out of anybody, of my friends list anyway. But anyway, back to the point is, so nowadays my Facebook friends are mostly people that I don't know. So people that add me only so that we can be friends in like Love Nikki Dress Up Queen or Shining Nikki. But here's what I found out. I found out that one of my Facebook friends, I probably shouldn't say their name for privacy reasons, but so one of my Facebook friends who was ranked number one of all my friends for Love Nikki Dress Up Queen, well, they named their character Lady Amalthea. Lady Amalthea is from The Last Unicorn, because the unicorn, after in the movie The Last Unicorn, which is from like 1982, after the unicorn was transformed by the magic to be human, then Schmendrick and Molly Grew referred to her as Lady Amalthea. So that was apparently just a name that they made up for the human version of the unicorn. But so this person, they actually named their character Lady Amalthea. And I'm like, no way. Somebody else has watched The Last Unicorn. And I'm like, okay, this is cool. So then I'm messaging them like, are you a fan of The Last Unicorn? They're like, yeah, it was so awesome. You know, so anyway, you know who you are, your friend. May the horse be with you. But yeah, The Last Unicorn was such a really awesome movie. I've watched it like 6 times. But it's sort of deep. It's sort of a deep movie. In fact, there are some really good movie reviewers. There are people who on YouTube that have reviewed The Last Unicorn and really talked about the meaning of it. But it's one of the weirdest parts of it is the way that the unicorn is immortal, but when the unicorn becomes human, they actually start to fear death. They actually, you know, fear being mortal and dying. And it's creepy. Okay, it's really creepy, and they also fall in love with the prince. But anyway, I don't want to spoil the whole movie. You got to watch the movie because it's a really good movie. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, the point was that is the kind of Facebook friends I have. People who play dress-up games, and we send each other stamina or whatever in the game. It's sort of like it was with Farmville. It's like the days of Farmville. It's just great. But yeah, I mean, let's see here. Now I'm streaming at 60 frames per second, and my CPU usage is only around 4%, which is really not bad. Now, I don't know if my bitrate is right or not, because when I first installed OBS, I used like the wizard to automatically help me determine the right bitrate or whatever. So I don't really know, and I don't really know if this stream is going right or not. But so this is a Twitch stream, and the thing about streaming is that obviously things can happen wrong if your internet cuts out. But I still am hoping that the internet is good enough to stream sometimes, because what if I want to do some podcasts with people? Because now if I try to set up a podcast now, okay, here's one thing I don't know. Now I know that I know that other Twitch streamers, they have ways that they have guests on their show, but I don't really know how they do it. I don't know much about streaming. I want to learn more, but normally I use like StreamYard if I'm wanting to stream something to something and I want to have guests on it. That's what I usually use, and I used to use StreamYard a lot, so it's still a viable option. But it's easier just to use OBS. But I'm also waiting to hear from somebody about a job tomorrow. I'm supposed to start onboarding for a new job tomorrow, and I'm still waiting for them to call me. So they may call me soon, I hope, because I've been waiting. I mean, I already called and talked to somebody to have the director call me back, and I don't want to try calling again. You know, it's kind of their job to let me know when they want me to be there tomorrow, but I shall be ready. But anyway, I mean, I'm actually pretty excited about this MacBook because even though, okay, it's not that good of a machine when it comes to, like, say, playing Tetris because it can't play the I mean, it can't play the Windows games. Like, my Linux installation can even still play the Windows games. Plus, I have dual boot on the other PC. So if I want to play Tetris Effect Connected or Puyo Puyo Tetris, I have to go back to the normal computer I'm using. And I highly doubt I would ever buy a MacBook myself, but since the school sent this to me, and I think it's just paid for as part of my tuition, then I'll use it to record videos. It's actually not such a bad idea because it has a lot of space. So I imagine this laptop will be used for, let's say there's a specific software I have to use for a school assignment. I might use this laptop they sent me because that's probably why they sent it. But then I can also use it to stream or record videos. It's not a bad idea. Plus, I'm just curious about MacBooks, but a Mac is very different. So I can still use it. I can use it for doing email. I can use it for posting on social media. I can do all the web browser stuff. But there's a few differences. On Windows or Linux, I'm used to having on the top right corner, you have the X that you click that closes that program, or a little line that minimizes or maximizes. You have different buttons, but those things are on the top left now. So the layout's different, but there's still menu bars. There's still like a little toolbar at the bottom, or I don't know what you call it. But anyway, so it works, and so this MacBook is actually pretty sweet. Good for recording videos. I see myself recording a lot of videos. And also, just for your information, I do totally know that my hair is whack. And that's what happens after I took a shower and combed it and then brushed it. And then it's just like still like, whoa, this is cool. So, but yeah, so anyway, so I like this MacBook and I just wanted to do a test stream because this will go on Twitch and then I'll probably download it and upload this to other places. But that's kind of the way it is with this MacBook. And it'll be very helpful also because even though it's going to take me practice to use it, the thing is I don't think I would be using it as a machine for programming new things. And part of the reason I don't think I would is because first of all, it's weird. Like on Linux, first of all, Linux is better than Windows. Okay, we already know Linux is better than Windows because you can have your terminal program, you can change the size of the text really easy. All the paths are you just install things, they're in the path. You don't have to, you usually have fewer compiler flags when you're compiling C programs. Programming is easier on Linux. There's no doubt about that. Windows, it can be done. It takes a lot longer because you have to choose an install location. There's nothing standard, so you have to choose an install location. And then you have to make your build scripts to match that because you have to include your include flag, the I flag for include this directory for the include files, and the capital L flag for the linkers. But anyway, that's crazy stuff because compiling C programs is harder than writing C code itself. I've said that before, and I will say that as long as I live, because it's one thing to write a program, whether that's a Tetris game. Well, the Tetris game took a while, but whether it's a Tetris game or whether it's a Hello World program, having the source code, having that in file, that's not hard. Getting it compiled and run, that can be a little bit more tricky because you have to know where that is, you have to know the commands, or you have to know how to use the IDE. And so I haven't used an IDE for the longest time. I've tried Visual Studio on Windows, it's a pain. And I just used the terminal to change directory to where I had downloaded my files, but I got my Tetris game. I got the Raylib version and the SDL version working, so I can play my own Tetris game on this MacBook. But I'm not really sure if that's something I would want to do very much. But the fact that I can, now that I have it basically installed on my MacBook, I can play my own Tetris game, even though I can't play any of the official Tetris games on this MacBook. I can play my own. But anyway, let's see. It was something else I was going to say. Oh yeah, that's why I wouldn't use this MacBook to develop new programs. Mostly because, first of all, I don't really know how to navigate it very well, so it'd be maybe slow. I also don't know how to modify, like I don't know how to modify the size of the text, but I'm sure I could read some guides on it. The thing is, I guess I already really know how to do everything on Linux. I know how to do everything on Ubuntu Linux. And I've been using Ubuntu Linux since I was actually a teenager. Most people don't know that, but I was using like Ubuntu 5.22 a long time ago on a computer with only 256 megabytes of RAM. But so I got used to the Ubuntu way. I got used to the look of the terminal. I got used to the customization. And I suppose given enough time, I could learn to use this MacBook too. But seeing as how MacBooks are a little bit more complicated and they're more expensive and not the kind of thing I'd buy, I feel like it's definitely worth my while to mostly continue development on Linux and then porting it over to Mac and Windows. Because that's kind of the way I do. I like Linux. It's what I do the most of. But then if I want to just play some games, then I usually just boot into Windows because most games run on Windows because, Microsoft has monopoly, and because everything has Windows when you first buy in a store, most games are targeted towards Windows so the most number of people can play them. So let me just put it this way. So so Microsoft Windows is like the heterosexual of operating systems because just as most people are straight, most people are heterosexual, most people come pre-installed with Windows. I mean, their computers do. The people themselves don't. Oh God, I hope not. Microsoft already has too much control. But anyway, and then like Linux is sort of like we've established Windows is the heterosexual, and then Linux is sort of like the asexual. It's kind of like the asexual of operating systems because there's a lot that it doesn't have. So like Linux is asexual because just as asexuals don't have the same needs, they don't have the same purpose as heterosexuals. And then like then then Macintosh, the Apple devices, and the Mac OS X is basically the homosexuals because they're more widely known about than the asexuals, but they're not as popular as the heterosexuals. So Windows is straight, Mac is gay, and Linux is asexual. Basically, I basically described computer operating systems using sexual orientation. That is what I have done, and I am proud of that. And I think that makes sense. I actually had some solid reasoning about that. But I suppose that's all I have to say for now, and then I can look at how this turned out. So I hope somebody has enjoyed this little computer technology rant. That's all I have to say. Until we meet again.